The Piazza dei Miracoli, formerly known as Piazza del Duomo, is a white-walled area located in Pisa, Tuscany, Italy. Recognized as an important center of European medieval art and one of the finest architectural complexes in the world. Considered a sacred area by its owner, the Catholic Church, the square is dominated by four great religious edifices: the Pisa Cathedral, the Pisa Baptistery, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and the Campo Santo Monumental. Partly paved and partly grassed, the Piazza dei Miracoli is also the site of the Ospedale Nuovo di Santo Spirito, which houses the Synopias Museum, and the Cathedral Museum. The name Piazza dei Miracoli was created by the Italian writer and poet Gabriele D'Annunzio who, in his novel Forse no, described the square as the Prato dei Miracoli, or the Meadow of Miracles. The square is sometimes called the Campo dei Miracoli. In 1987 the whole square was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Cathedral. The heart of the Piazza del Duomo is the Duomo, the medieval cathedral of the Archdiocese of Pisa, entitled to Santa Maria Assunta. The cathedral has two aisles on either side of the nave. The transept consists of three aisles. The church is known also as the Primatial, the Archbishop of Pisa being a primate since 1092. Its construction began in 1064 by the architect Buscetta, and set the model for the distinctive Pisan Romanesque style of architecture. The mosaics of the interior, as well as the pointed arches, show a strong Byzantine influence. The facade, of grey marble and white stone set with discs of coloured marble, was built by a master named Reynaldo, as indicated by an inscription above the middle door. Reynaldus Prudens Operator. The massive bronze main doors were made in the workshops at Giambologna, replacing the original doors destroyed in a fire in 1595. The original central door was in bronze and made around 1180 by Bonanno Pisano, while the other two were probably in wood. However, worshippers never used the facade doors to enter, instead entering by way of the Porta di San Ranieri, in front of the Leaning Tower. Made in around 1180 by Bonanno Pisano. Above the doors there are 4 rows of open galleries with, on top, statues of Madonna with Child and, on the corners, the 4 evangelists. Also in the facade we can find the tomb of Buscetta and an inscription about the foundation of the cathedral and the victorious battle against Saracens. At the east end of the exterior, high on a column rising from the gable is a modern replica of the Pisa Griffin, the largest Islamic metal sculpture known, the original of which was placed there probably in the 11th or 12th century, and is now in the Cathedral Museum. The interior is faced with black and white marble and has a gilded ceiling and a frescoed dome. It was largely redecorated after a fire in 1595, which destroyed most of the Renaissance artworks. Fortunately, the impressive mosaic, in the apse, of Christ in Majesty, flanked by the Blessed Virgin and Saint John the Evangelist, survived the fire. It evokes the mosaics in the Church of Monreale, Sicily. Although it is said that the mosaic was done by Cimabue, only the head of St. John was done by the artist in 1302 and was his last work, since he died in Pisa in the same year. The cupola, at the intersection of the nave and the transept, was decorated by Rinaldi showing the Ascension of the Blessed Virgin. Galileo is believed to have formulated his theory about the movement of a pendulum by watching the swinging of the incense lamp hanging from the ceiling of the nave. That lamp, smaller and simpler than the present one, it is now kept in the Camposanto, in the Aula Chapel. The granite Corinthian columns between the nave and the aisle came originally from the Mosque of Palermo, captured by the Pisans in 1063. The coffer ceiling of the nave was replaced after the fire of 1595. The present gold-decorated ceiling carries the coat of arms of the Medici. The elaborately carved pulpit, which also survived the fire, was made by Giovanni Pisano and is one of the masterworks of medieval sculpture. It was packed away during the redecoration and was not rediscovered and re-erected until 1926. The pulpit is supported by plain columns on one side and by caryatids and a telemon on the other. The latter represents St. Michael, the Evangelists, the four cardinal virtues flanking the church, and a bold, naturalistic depiction of a naked Hercules. A central plinth with the liberal arts supports the four theological virtues. The present-day reconstruction of the pulpit is not the correct one. Now it lies not in the same original position, that was nearer the main altar, and the disposition of the columns and the panels are not the original ones. Also the original stairs were lost. The upper part has 9 panels dramatic showing scenes from the New Testament, carved in white marble with a chiaroscuro effect and separated by figures of prophets. Annunciation, Massacre of the Innocents, Nativity, Adoration of the Magi, Flight into Egypt, Crucifixion, and 2 panels of the Last Judgment. The church also contains the bones of Saint Ranieri, Pisa's patron saint, and the tomb of the Holy Roman Emperor Henry VII, carved by Tino da Camino in 1315. That tomb, originally in the apse just behind the main altar, was disassembled and changed position many times during the years for political reasons. At last the sarcophagus is still in the cathedral, but some of the statues were put in the Campo Santo or in the top of the facade of the church. The original statues now are in the Museum of the Opera del Duomo. Pope Gregory VIII was also buried in the cathedral. The fire in 1595 destroyed his tomb. The cathedral has a prominent role in determining the beginning of the Pisan New Year. Between the 10th century and 1749, when the Tuscan calendar was reformed, Pisa used its own calendar, in which the first day of the year on March 25, which is the day of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary. The Pisan New Year begins 9 months before the ordinary one. The exact moment is determined by a ray of sun that, through a window on the left side, hit an egg-shaped marble, just above the pulpit by Giovanni Pisano. This occurs at noon. Some relics brought during the Crusades can also be found in the cathedral. Alleged remains are 3 saints and a vase that is said to be one of the jars of Cana. The building, as have several in Pisa, has tilted slightly since its construction, though not nearly to the extent of the nearby tower. Lunette above the middle door of the cathedral, picturing Blessed Mary by Giuseppe Modena da Luca. Apse with mosaic. Coffer ceiling. Altar of Saint Ranierius. Interior view of central part. Marble columns. The compound, with the Pisa griffin high above the apse on a column. Aerial perspective of Piazza del Duomo. Pisa Tower with cathedral and baptistry at night. Details in Romanesque architecture style. White marble statue. In front of the altar. Madonna with child. Interior view. Baptistry. The baptistry, dedicated to Saint John the Baptist, stands opposite the west end of the Duomo. The round Romanesque building was begun in the mid-12th century. 1153 Mens August Fundata Fuit Haec. It was built in Romanesque style by an architect known as Diotis Salvi, who worked also in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the city. His name is mentioned on a pillar inside, as Diotis Salvi Magister. The construction was not, however, finished until the 14th century, when the loggia, the top story and the dome were added in Gothic style by Nicola Pisano and Giovanni Pisano. It is the largest baptistry in Italy. Its circumference measures 107.25 meters. Taking into account the statue of Saint John the Baptist on top of the dome, it is even a few centimeters higher than the leaning tower. The portal, facing the facade of the cathedral, is flanked by 2 classical columns, while the inner jambs are executed in Byzantine style. The lintel is divided in 2 tiers. The lower one depicts several episodes in the life of Saint John the Baptist, while the upper one shows Christ between the Madonna and Saint John the Baptist. flanked by angels and the evangelists. The immensity of the interior is overwhelming, but it is surprisingly plain and lacks decoration. It has notable acoustics also. The octagonal font at the center dates from 1246 and was made by Guido Bigarelli da Como. The bronze sculpture of St. John the Baptist at the center of the font is a remarkable work by Italo Griselli. The pulpit was sculpted between 1255 to 1260 by Nicola Pisano, father of Giovanni Pisano, the artist who produced the pulpit in the Duomo. The scenes on the pulpit, and especially the classical form of the naked Hercules, show at best Nicola Pisano's qualities as the most important precursor of Italian Renaissance sculpture by reinstating antique representations. Therefore, surveys of the Italian Renaissance usually begin with the year 1260, the year that Nicola Pisano dated this pulpit. Baptistry dome. Baptistry interior. Baptistry font by Guido Bigarelli da Como. Pulpit by Nicola Pisano. Stained glass window. Baptistry floor. Leaning tower. The bell tower, commonly known as the Leaning Tower of Pisa, is located behind the cathedral, the last of the three major buildings on the Piazza to be built. Construction of the bell tower began in 1173 and took place in 3 stages over the course of 177 years, with the bell chamber only added in 1372. 5 years after construction began, when the building had reached the 3rd floor level, the weak subsoil and poor foundation led to the building sinking on its south side. The building was left for a century, which allowed the subsoil to stabilize itself and prevented the building from collapsing. In 1272, to adjust the lean of the building, when construction resumed, the upper floors were built with one side taller than the other. The 7th and final floor was added in 1319. By the time the building was completed, the lean was approximately 1 degree, or 80 centimeters from vertical. At its greatest, measured prior to 1990, the lean measured approximately 5.5 degrees. As of 2010, the lean was reduced to approximately 4 degrees. The tower stands approximately 60 meters high, and was built to accommodate a total of 7 main bells, cast to the musical scale. La Santa, cast in 1654 by Giovanni Pietro Orlandi, weight 3,620 kilograms. Il Crocifisso, cast in 1572 by Vincenzo Posenta, weight 2,462 kilograms. San Ranieri, cast in 1719–21 by Giovanni Andrea Marini, weight 1,448 kilograms. La Terza, the first small bell, cast in 1473, weight 300 kilograms. La Pascarecchia or La Giustizia, cast in 1262 by Lotteringo, weight 1,014 kilograms. Il Vespuccio, the second small bell, cast in the 14th century and again in 1501 by Nicola di Jacopo, weight 1,000 kilograms. Dal Pozzo, cast in 1606 and again in 2004, weight 652 kilograms. There are 296 steps leading to the top of the tower. Leaning Tower of Pisa and Pisa Cathedral. Leaning Tower of Pisa and Pisa Cathedral. Duomo di Pisa by night. Leaning Tower of Pisa and Pisa Cathedral. Leaning Tower of Pisa. Leaning Tower of Pisa. Camposanto Monumental. The Camposanto Monumental, also known as Campo Santo or Camposanto Vecchio, is located at the northern edge of the square. This walled cemetery, which some believe to be the most beautiful cemetery in the world, is said to have been built around a shipload of sacred soil from Calvary, brought back to Pisa from the Fourth Crusade by Ubaldo de Lanfranchi, the Archbishop of Pisa in the 12th century. This is where the name Campo Santo originates. The building itself dates from a century later and was erected over the earlier burial ground. The building of this huge, oblong Gothic cloister began in 1278 by the architect Giovanni di Simone. He died in 1284 when Pisa suffered a defeat in a naval battle of Meloria against the Genoans. The cemetery was only completed in 1464. The outer wall is composed of 43 blind arches. There are 2 doorways. The one on the right is crowned by a gracious Gothic tabernacle and contains the Virgin Mary with Child surrounded by 4 saints. It is the work from the second half of the 14th century by a follower of Giovanni Pisano. Most of the tombs are under the arcades, although a few are on the central lawn. The inner court is surrounded by elaborate round arches with slender mullions and pluri-lobed tracery. The Camposanto monumentals contained a large collection of Roman sculptures and sarcophagi, but now there are only 84 remaining. The walls were once covered in frescoes. The first were applied in 1360, the last about 3 centuries later. The stories of the Old Testament by Benozzo Gozzoli were situated in the North Gallery, while the South Arcade was famous for the stories of the Genesis by Piero di Puccio. The most remarkable fresco is the Triumph of Death, a realistic work by Buonanima Buffalmacco. On 27 July 1944, incendiary bombs dropped by Allied aircraft set the roof of the building on fire and covered them in molten lead, all but destroying them. Since 1945, restoration works have been going on and now the Campo Santo has been brought back to its original state. Camposanto monumental interior. Hallway in Camposanto monumental. Frescoes in Camposanto monumental. Some of the saints' relics in the Dal Pozzo Chapel. Chains of the medieval harbour of Pisa. Ospedale Nuovo di Santo Spirito. The Ospedale Nuovo di Santo Spirito is located on the southeast corner of the square. Built in 1257 by Giovanni I Simone over a pre-existing smaller hospital, the function of this hospital was to help pilgrims, poor, sick people, and abandoned children by providing a shelter. The name of the hospital was later changed to Ospedale della Misericordia or di Santa Chiara, which was the name of the small church included in the complex. The hospital exterior was constructed with brick walls with 2 light windows in Gothic style. The hospital interior was painted in 2 colors, black and white, to imitate the marble colors of the other buildings. In 1562, during the time when the Medici dominated the city, the hospital was restructured according to Florentine Renaissance canons. All the doors and windows were modified with new rectangular ones encased in grey sandstone. Today, the building is no longer entirely a hospital. Since 1976, the middle part of the building contains the Sinopias Museum, where original drawings of the Campo Santo frescoes are kept. Palazzo dell'Opera. The Opera Palace is a complex of houses in the northeast corner of the square. They have been built in different periods, with the main building dating back to at least the 14th century and the latest to the 19th century. Originally these houses belonged to the workmen of the cathedral complex, the tailor, the gardener, the bell ringers, etc., until the 19th century when the administration offices of the Opera della Primazia were moved in. In the same years the chapter house was also moved inside the complex. In the course of time the complex was rearranged several times, but the facade of the main building still conserves its original aspect. In the first years of the 21st century the administration offices and the chapter moved again to a nearby palace close to the archbishopric. Only a few rooms on the ground floor are still used as offices for the surveillance and technical staff. After the move, the upper rooms were transformed in a platform for temporary exhibitions. This is the first time people can actually visit those rooms. The most interesting rooms open to the public are the President Room, the Deputation Room, the Chapel, and the Chapter Room. Among the closed ones are the Loggia Room, the Scrittoia Room, the Viola Room and the Technical Room. Main entrance. The corridor in the ground floor. Fresco in the Technical Room, painted in the first quarter of 15th century by a Senese painter. fresco in the Deputation Rooms, painted in 1299 by Vincino di Vanni and Giovanni de Paracchiato. Some of the original parts of the Giovanni Pisano's pulpit in the President Room, the Chapter Room, the Chapel Room,